Good evening. We're going to call to order the August 11th, 2022, 1:30 p.m. Canvassing Board meeting held here at our King County Elections headquarters in Renton for the August 2nd, 2022 primary election. I am Canvassing Board member Julie Wise, the Director of Elections, and with me I have Canvassing Board member Susan Sloniker, the Interim Civil Chief Division Chief in the Prosecuting Attorney's Office, and Stephanie Sirkovich, our Chief of Staff to the King County Council. We are staffed today by Geraldine Hampton, our King County Elections Ballot Processing Manager. This meeting is being live streamed via the King County Elections Facebook page and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel after this meeting. For our first item, Geraldine will be providing an overview on the election, as well as some training for our annual training for our Canvassing Board members, including myself.
Yes, so hello everybody. Today we have 26 ballots to review that have questions of voter intent. So before we go forth and look at those ballots, we do an annual review of our voter intent manual to make sure all of the rules are fresh in our minds. So before you have a copy of the manual itself. We'll go through it together. So if you just open to the table of contents, you can see there's a bunch of rules that tell us how to process the various types of marks you might find on a ballot. It's kind of like learning English or grammar in elementary school. They give you rules and give you exceptions. So if we turn to page 2, the first rule of the book is Rule A. It's talking about a target area. So it's telling us that any marks made inside the target area are going to be counted as valid votes. Any marks outside of the target area are valid only if they form a pattern of similar marks. We'll talk more about that in Rule B, or if they're written instructions as identified in Rule E. There is a specific rule here that marks that trace or outline a target area are not valid votes unless they form a pattern of similar marks. You'll want to remember that rule because we actually have a ballot that has a question pertaining to this rule. And then the 4 exceptions to Rule A are if you have an obvious stray mark, a hesitation mark, part of a written note, or a correction. So on page 3, there are a handful of examples of the different types of marks you might see within the target area. We've got an X, we've got a perfectly filled in oval. We've got a couple versions of a check mark, even a tiny little check mark in a corner. Those can all be considered valid votes. They are marked within the target area. The example you find on page 4, it's just showing the same type of example, different marks within the target area. And instead of ovals, there's a different tabulation system that has rectangles for their tabulation system. But same idea there. If you move on to page 5, we can see that there's only one of the 4 contests that has a mark within the target area. So that first contest for State Representative District 14, Position 1, the mark in the target area is for Teddy Roosevelt, and therefore that is the only valid vote on that entire example, even though there's a couple that are circled. Moving on to page 6, another series of examples. In this case, there's one target area that's filled in for that first contest in the upper left-hand corner. The rest are marks outside the target area, but not in a consistent pattern. Therefore, the only valid mark is that first contest for Teddy Roosevelt. Jumping to page 7, all of these marks are valid votes. And there's an actual phenomenon that's notated in this rule book showing what's called voter fatigue. So a voter votes strongly in the beginning, but they slowly get smaller and smaller. We see this periodically, and it's called voter fatigue. If we can notice this pattern, those are all valid votes. Page 8 just shows another example of voter fatigue on a different tabulation system. Moving to page 9, here we see examples of that overtrace. So the vote for Teddy Roosevelt in example 4A is the valid vote because an oval trace is not considered a valid mark to be called a vote. If you look at example 4B, none of those are valid votes because they are all tracing the marked area, the target area. On page 10, we see an example of a stray mark. So the first two contests are valid votes. There's a mark in the lower left-hand corner where a mark just seems to go through the target area, but not intentionally. That is considered a stray mark and therefore not a valid vote. Examples on page 11 are similar. The difference here is you have a validly filled in target area for the lower right-hand contest, and there is another larger stray mark that just happens to go through another target area. That is not a valid mark for a candidate, therefore would not be considered an overvote. The valid vote is still James Monroe for that example. Page 12 talks about some more stray marks. These stray marks are where they are sort of crossing out the candidate or their selection. Some of that mark is going into the target area. These are not valid marks, not valid votes, and therefore not considered votes. The caveat there is if this is what the voter is doing on the entirety of their ballot, it's going to be considered a pattern of similar marks. And patterns can appear on the entire ballot, meaning the front and the back. It can appear as a pattern on just the front, or a pattern on just for candidates, or just for measures. And we'll talk more about that in just a couple pages. I should say also on page 12, that example can also be a vote if that's the only on a ballot. It would be considered a pattern of one. All right, page 13 is showing an example of a hesitation mark. So in this example on 1A, there's a fully filled in target area for Teddy Roosevelt, and then just a little pinpoint for Abigail Adams. The valid vote is Teddy Roosevelt. This would not be considered an overvote. Same thing with example 1B, validly filled in target area for Teddy Roosevelt, hesitation mark for Abigail. Page 14 is showing a little bit larger of a hesitation mark. These have lines that are going through a secondary target area. So for both example 2A and example 2B, these would be valid votes for Teddy Roosevelt. Page 15 shows a couple examples of even larger marks being considered hesitation marks. About a quarter of the secondary target area being filled in. These would still be considered hesitation marks. And so for both example 3A and 3B, the valid vote would be for Teddy Roosevelt. Page 16 is showing us examples of voters sharing some feelings with us. But even though some of the words go into a target area, it is not an intentional vote for any of the candidates and therefore not valid votes. Same with page 17, same type of example. Rule B on page 18 is where it starts to get fun, and we can talk more about those pattern of similar marks. So we'll take it paragraph by paragraph. The first paragraph tells us that marks made outside of the target area shall be counted as valid votes as long as those marks form a pattern of similar marks. All races and issues for which the mark has indicated a choice outside the target area must be a similar type of mark. So that's just telling us if the mark is outside versus inside. If it's the same type of mark, it's going to be okay if we can consider it a pattern of similar marks. The second paragraph goes on to say marks made outside the target area may be counted as valid votes, even if there's one pattern that's used on the front of the ballot, the first side, and a different pattern used on the back of the ballot. We have separate types of patterns, and they would still be valid votes. Third paragraph goes on to say marks made outside of the target area shall be counted as valid votes if you've got a similar pattern used for measures and a different set of patterns used for candidate races. If some of the marks are in the target area and some are not, but it's the same type of mark used everywhere, they're all going to be counted as valid marks. And here's the one we were just looking at saying it's not a vote. But if they do it in a pattern all over the ballot, the strike through is a valid vote. So marks that strike through the candidate name or ballot measure in a pattern of similar marks throughout the ballot, they are going to be considered valid votes. And the second to last line on the page, a mark outside the target area on a ballot that contains only one race or measure is not required to form a pattern. Essentially, they're saying you can have a pattern of one if it's the only thing they do on the ballot. So page 19 gives us some examples of a type of mark we see frequently, check marks. So all 4 of these check marks are outside of the target area, but because it's a pattern of similar marks, they are all valid votes. Page 20 is showing a pattern. The voter decided to use circles. Again, all 4 of those selections would be valid votes because the voter intent is clear and we can clearly distinguish which candidate those circles are attached to. Page 21 is my favorite page in the book because it shows a couple of contests where there's X's inside the target area and a couple where X's are outside of the target area. But because it's a pattern, it's the same type of mark, they're all going to be considered valid votes. Page 22 shows more examples of types of marks. In this case, it's check marks, but again, all valid votes. So page 23 shows an example where a voter showed us that they know how to mark the target area correctly. The contest where the lower left-hand side, Thurgood Marshall is filled in completely. The other marks on the ballot are not a consistent pattern. Therefore, the only valid vote on this example on page 23 is for Thurgood Marshall. Same with page 24. There are 3 contests that have check marks, but there is a contest where the target area is filled in completely and correctly. Therefore, on this page, the only valid vote is Thurgood Marshall. Page 25 is showing us some examples of one pattern on the front of the ballot. In this instance, it's check marks, and there's a different pattern on the back. I guess the pattern is they filled out the ovals the way we want them to on the back. So all of those check marks on the front of the ballot would be considered valid votes because we can see which response the check mark is linked to. Page 26 is showing an example of a pattern of circles being used for measured responses and underlines being used for candidate responses. All of those would be considered valid votes. And even on the back, there's one more contest. Sorry, that's a measure that they used a circle, similar to what they did on the front, still all valid votes. Rule B continues on page 28 to tell us that when the voter marks only one race or measure, the act of returning a ballot tells us that they wish to cast a vote, and therefore whatever mark it is that they decide to use, we can count that as a valid vote as long as we can clearly discern what response that mark is linked to. So we're going to see a series of examples of the types of marks a voter might make. And for page 29 and the next few pages, these are examples of a contest that are on separate ballots, not the same ballot. So we see the use of a line, an underline, circling the response. Example 1C looks like the voter assigned the response they wanted to vote for. And then 1D, although it may look like a correction, if it's the only thing that they do on the ballot, it's going to be considered a valid vote. Page 30 goes on to have several more examples of the types of marks we might see. A voter wrote approve next to the approve. There's the use of an arrow, an interesting connect the response using a circle, and then connecting with a line. More examples on page 31, using a circle, writing yes next to a response, putting an X next to the response, or even a full line through on a response. If it's the only thing they're doing on a ballot, it can be considered or shall be considered a valid vote. Page 32 is showing an example, a couple examples where it may look like a correction, but again, I just mentioned if it's the only thing they do on the ballot, it is therefore going to be a valid vote. Page 33 shows an example of a ballot where there are many races and measures on their ballot, but the voter decided to only make their selection in one of the contests. Therefore, that circle is going to be the only mark they make. It's the pattern of one. It's the pattern of a circle, and that vote for president would be a valid vote. Rule C moves on to corrections. So if the voter has followed the instructions on how to make a new selection, the stricken vote shall not be counted. If the second choice is marked, it shall be counted as a valid vote. If the second choice is not marked, the race is going to be considered undervoted. If the voter has marked two target areas and placed an X or a slash, like a half an X over one of the marked areas, the choice without the X or the slash shall be counted as the valid vote. Now we can see some examples on the next pages. Page 35 has an example. 1A, the voter filled in William Henry Harrison, as well as Teddy Roosevelt, but they crossed out Teddy Roosevelt, therefore making William Henry Harrison the valid vote. Similar example on example 1B, they filled out a target area, changed their mind, crossed it out, filled in a new target area, making the fully filled in one that's not crossed out the valid vote. Page 36 is showing a couple of examples of a correction to an undervote. So for these examples, this is not the only contest they voted on the ballot, and it's not the pattern of similar marks. So if we just saw this in context of a ballot where everything else was voted normally, meaning just a filled in oval, this would be considered an undervote and not a valid vote. Page 37 shows another method in which voters can use to make corrections. If they fill out a target area, so for example, 3A, voter filled out Teddy Roosevelt, changed their mind, put an X through it, then filled in William Henry Harrison. The valid vote, for example, 3A would be William Henry Harrison. Same with example 3B, using an X is a valid way to make a correction, provided there's a secondary oval filled in. Page 38 shows the example where they did not use an entire X to make a correction, but using half of an X or a slash also can be used as a valid correction. All right, Rule D on page 40 talks about when it's not a correction. So if the voter has both marked a choice correctly, they filled in the target area, and they put an X in the same target area, but there's not a second selection made, the mark that has the target area filled in is the valid vote. And then there's a note here saying changes made by the voter on the wording of the ballot does not invalidate the votes cast for that race or measure. People can't just write in their own feelings and haven't changed their vote. All right, so some examples. On page 41, these 4 examples show because one target area is filled in, even though there's an X on it or half of an X, or even a line through, it's going to still be a valid vote because there's not a secondary target area that's also filled in. Page 42 shows an example. This would be a vote for yes, and the fact that they changed some of the wording in the levy does not change the content of that vote or the levy for that matter. Page 44, Rule E talks about written instructions. So if the voters attempted to vote or make a correction by providing us some written instructions, it shall be counted as the voter intended. So written instructions can include words, circles, lines, or arrows. So we appreciate voters like this. So for these examples on page 45, it appears, for example, 1A, that the voter filled in Teddy Roosevelt, changed their mind, scratched through it, then they filled in a secondary oval. They knew it looked kind of messy. They wanted us to be sure we know which vote they wanted. They circled a secondary choice. Example 1B shows it looks like 2 corrections, but they put no's next to the ones they didn't want to count. They put a yes next to the one they do want to count. And then in example 1C, they even use an arrow, this one telling us which candidate they wanted to make a selection for. Rule F on page 46 just tells us that marks identifying the voter, like initials, signatures, or address labels, do not disqualify the ballot. We just ignore and process the ballot and ignore the name. So there's an example on page 47 where it appears the voter signed their ballot itself. We would just ignore that. Page 48 is giving us an example. The ballot will be accepted. Even though there are initials on it, it's not going to disqualify the contest or the ballot itself. And that voter gave us a lot of written instructions saying they've changed their mind and they don't want to vote for this district, so we would not count that vote. Example on page 49 just shows a ballot that has an address label on it. We would, again, as I mentioned before, ignore that and process the ballot as is. Rule G on page 50 talks about overvotes. So races or issues that have more target areas marked than are allowed. So for us, we can only mark one. No votes for that race or issue will be counted. There is an exception to Rule G. If it's a writing in the name of a candidate that's already printed on the ballot, we will give that vote to the printed candidate. All right, page 51 shows some examples of overvotes. So there's two target areas that are filled in. That would be considered an overvote, and neither candidate gets that vote. But we do account for the number of overvotes in a contest in its own category, so we will keep track of how many overvotes we get. Rule H on page 52 talks about write-ins and blank target areas. So if a name is written in on a write-in line, it's going to be counted as a valid write-in vote. Doesn't matter if the target area is filled in or not. The act of writing on the line makes it a write-in vote. Page 53 shows different examples of that. Example 1A, they wrote Rosa Parks in the line, but they didn't fill in a bubble. That's going to be a valid write-in vote. Example 1B, they wrote on the write-in line and they filled in the bubble. Also a valid write-in vote. Same with the bottom two examples. One is has the target area filled in, one does not. All four of these are examples of valid votes for write-in Rosa Parks. Rule I, when there's a write-in that's already on the ballot. So if there's a name of a candidate who's already printed on the ballot, and that same name is written in, the vote shall not be tallied as an overvote, even though there's two target areas. It's going to be counted as a valid vote for that printed candidate. This applies even if the target area is marked or not marked. So to see some examples of that, on page 55, example 1A, there's a target area filled in for Abigail Adams, and Abigail Adams is also written in on that write-in line. We would just tally that vote for Abigail Adams, the printed candidate. Same for example 1B. Even though there's two target areas filled in, we can see that the write-in name is for a printed candidate. The printed candidate would get that vote. So same for example 1C and 1D. Those are name variations, but we know that it is attached to candidate Abigail Adams. Rule J, on page 56, talks about name variations. So if a write-in vote is cast for a declared write-in candidate using a commonly recognizable nickname or spelling variation, it's going to be counted as a valid vote for that candidate. Got 4 examples on page 57. So we have a declared write-in candidate called Thomas Smith, and we can see in example 1A, they spelled Thomas a little bit different. They put it on the write-in line, that would be a valid vote. Tommy Smith is a common nickname for Thomas. Tom Smythe is close, and another version of the spelling of Tom. So all 4 of these examples would be a valid vote for the declared write-in. Rule K, blank write-in line. If the write-in line is marked, but no name is written in on the line, it's not going to be counted as a valid vote, even though the tally system might see it as a vote. So we know it takes the writing on the line to turn it into a write-in vote. So if they fill in the bubble, but they don't take the action of writing on the line, it's not a valid vote. So on page 59, you see 4 different examples where they tried to draw attention to the writing line, but they didn't actually write a candidate's name on it. So no valid votes on that example page. Rule L, writing in blank line and a candidate. So if the candidate's target area is filled in and the write-in target area is filled in, but there's nothing written in on the write-in line, it's not going to be tallied as an overvote, again, because there's no writing on the line. It's going to be a valid vote for that printed candidate. So page 61 has 4 examples of what we might see. The target area filled in for a candidate, the write-in bubble filled in, but there's no writing on the line. Printed candidate gets that vote. Rule M, name combinations. So if a write-in vote is cast for a candidate with a combination of names already on the ballot, it's not going to be counted as a vote for either of the printed candidates. Instead, it shall be counted as a vote for the name as written. So on page 63, we can see on example 1A, there is a candidate called Teddy Roosevelt and a candidate called Abigail Adams. So a voter thought they were funny and they filled in the write-in line and they voted for Teddy Adams. But there might be a declared candidate named Teddy Adams, so the candidate, the write-in would be getting that vote. Same for example 1B. Rule N, page 64, write-ins again, this time a candidate and a write-in response area. So if a candidate's target area is marked, the write-in target area is also marked, and something other than the candidate's name is written in on the write-in line, it shall be counted as an overvote and not a valid vote for any candidate. If the candidate's target area is marked and the write-in target area is not marked, it shall be counted as a valid vote for the marked candidate. If we're not sure, we bring it to the canvassing board to take a look at. So on page 65, we have rule N, some examples. In example 1A, there are 3 actions that were taken. Filled in target area for a printed candidate, filled in target area for the write-in bubble, and writing on the line. 3 actions happened, therefore it's going to be considered an overvote. That is true even if the voter writes the word nobody on the write-in line, it's still the act of writing on the line is what makes it a vote. So for these 4 examples, they would be tallied as overvotes and not votes for the candidate. So 3 actions turns it into an overvote. On example page 66 of these examples, for example 2A, there's 1 action filling in the target area for the candidate, a 2nd action writing on the write-in line, if there's not that 3rd action. So therefore, for example, 2A would be considered a valid vote for the printed candidate. Same with the other 3 examples on the page, because there's only 2 actions instead of 3. Therefore, not an overvote and a valid vote for the printed candidate. Rule O on page 68, talking about when writing on a ballot doesn't make you eligible for things. So writing in a vote for a race that's not on your ballot, it's not going to be counted. We've got a great example here. A lot of people work in Seattle. They feel like they want to share their opinions on what happens in Seattle, but if they're not registered within the city limits, they don't get to vote on certain measures. So for this example, they wrote on the ballot a vote about the Seattle monorail project, but they are not eligible for that. Therefore, that would not be counted. Rule P, however, tells us if you put a write-in in a different location, but give us all the information we need, it will be counted as a valid vote. So a write-in vote for a race appearing somewhere else on the ballot, it's going to be counted as a valid vote as long as all the other requirements are fulfilled and the office, position number, and political party, if necessary, are clearly indicated. So for this example, we can see on the upper left-hand contest, state representative, district 14, position number 1 is something that the voter is eligible to vote on because it's printed on their ballot. They made a double correction, but they still wanted us to count a vote. They gave us the information, the district and position and the vote, and so therefore we can count that as a valid vote. We just put it in the wrong place. marks. Q, messy marks. This is a rule our canvassing board knows well because you deal with a lot of messy marks. So when otherwise valid votes marked in a target area are partially extended into the response area, it will be counted as a valid vote if most of the mark is in the target area and intent can easily be discerned. So we've got 3 examples on page 73 where a mark starts in one target area and it sort of drifts over into a secondary target area where the main part of the mark is that's what we're going to count as the valid vote. Rule R on page 74 tells us that voter intent for any contest shall not be determined based on the pattern of partisan voting. Therefore, we can't make a decision that they must mean this candidate because they voted for that party throughout the rest of the ballot. That's not a decision we can make. And then the best rule, I think, in the book is Rule S. It's called anything else. So there's literally a rule in the book that says if there's questionable marks that are outside of this guidebook, we take it to the canvassing board for review. Whew. All right, we made it. Now we're going to put you to the test. We've got 26 ballots for review. We're going to start out right out of the gate with a tough one. Okay. Okay, so for Ledge 33, state senator, does the unbubbled write-in, let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, does the unbubbled write-in vote cause the X'd out bubble to be a correction? We talked about corrections in Rule C, and that says an X'd out bubble is a correction. If the voter marked 2 target areas is the quote in the rule. Rule D says an X'd out bubble is a vote if the voter, I quote, has not marked the secondary target area, then that would also be a vote. But Rule H says a name written on the write-in line is a vote, even if the bubble isn't marked. Like this. So should the unbubbled write-in count as a marked target area for the purposes of Rule C and D, causing the X'd out bubble to be a correction? And then here's a note that in Rule N on page 64, an unbubbled write-in won't cause an overvote with a marked candidate. If the unbubbled write-in counts as a marked target area, the vote should be for the write-in candidate. If the unbubbled write-in vote doesn't count as a marked target area, the vote should be for the candidate, Karen. That was a lot. I apologize.
It's not really a yes or no. I would say that the vote for that unbubbled write-in candidate should count for this ballot.
Pass it for closer inspection.
So which was the rule? You said rule, it implicates Rule C.
So Rule C is on page 34, and it says that an X'd out bubble is a correction if the voter marked 2 target areas. So that was our conflict there.
Mm-hmm.
And Susie, you're stating that believe that this is a correction for Karen Kaiser and a vote for the write-in.
Correct, that's how I'm interpreting that.
And then the rule regarding the, if the target area is not marked for the write-in.
Normally, if the target is not marked for the write-in, it wouldn't matter. It would still be a vote for the write-in,
Right.
whether or not they marked the target area.
Right. I think based on that, I would tend to agree because they've crossed out the name of the printed candidate and written in. I think they just didn't mark the target area, but they intended for that to be the vote.
the board has determined that it is a write-in vote for legislative district number 33 state senator. Jeremy, shall I circle the entire write-in?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that was item B-0001. Now we're on to item B-002. In congressional district number 1, we have the same issue where the printed candidate has a X through the target area, and there's a write-in candidate with no bubble.
I would think we would handle this in the same way.
The board has determined for United States Representative Congressional District number 1, a vote for write-in.
Item B-0003, we've got one item on the front for congressional number 7 here. The vote for Jesse is scratched out. Is that scratch out a correction? Like we learned in Rule C, page 34 about corrections, instead of Rule E, page 44, where they talk about written instructions. It's not a full X, it's not a full slash, but does it look like they're trying to make a correction?
The rest of the ballot looks to me like it's making a correction. Or, the James candidates are the people.
See the ballot, please, Jeremy?
It looks like a scribble.
Yeah,
out.
like it's.
Someone scribbled it out.
The board has determined for United States Representative Congressional District number 7, it is a vote for Paul Glumas.
Right.
I agree. It looks like it's scratched out and very intentionally.
The board has determined for precinct committee officer, the Republican Party candidate is a undervote.
Now we're on to item B-0005. One item on the front for United States Senator. The bubble for Patty maybe has a strike through or a slash. Remember, a slash works like an X being a correction. The bubble for Henry has some scratches above it that might be initials. but we weren't sure if this felt completely like a correction and the voter initial, maybe their preferred selection. Let's zoom in a little bit.
Ms. Chairman.
There's a-
Side.
That's the battery. Thanks. This is a tough one, but these look like initials to me. Making me think that they're crossing out the vote for Patty Murray and that they want to vote for Henry Clay Dennison, but an initial, that that's their intent.
I agree.
The board has determined that for the United States Senator, it is a vote for Henry Clay Dennison. Is that correct? Correct, okay.
This, okay, the next item, B-0006 is the first of several entire ballot questions. Okay, so for every contest on the ballot, and this is both front and the single contest on the back, the voter bubbled the write-in line and wrote, "Yes, is a US citizen," while also marking a selection of a printed candidate. So can we, using Rule B, saying it's a pattern of similar marks, call these votes for the printed candidate? Since it seems unlikely the voter would want to negate and have everything overvoted.
Right, Geraldine, this is sort of to the spirit of Washington state voter intent law, right? They took the time to get registered, to get familiar with the issues, to return their ballot. Did they really intend to not have their ballot counted for any of their votes?
Exactly. And the writing on the line is the exact same phrase, and it is on every contest.
That we would count the votes for the written, printed candidate who they filled the bubble in for.
Right, and the writing is not a name of a person, correct? It's
Correct.
The canvassing board has determined for this ballot, would you like me to go with for each candidate, Gerald?
Yes, please.
Of course, United States Senator Sam Kusmer. Congressional District Number 7, Pramila Jayapal. Secretary of State Marquez Tiggs. State Senator Jamie Peterson. Legislative District Number 43, State Senator. Legislative District Number 43, Representative Position Number 1, Nicole Macri. Legislative District Number 43, Representative Position Number 2, Frank Chaw. That concludes the votes for that one, Geraldine. Did you want me to read them again?
One more time, just to make sure I wrote them down quickly.
State Senator Sam. Congressional District 7, Pramila. Secretary of State Marquez. Legislative District Number 43, State Senator Jamie. Position 1, Nicole. Position 2, Frank.
Moving on to item B-0007. It's another whole ballot situation. It's the same scenario where the voter marked a printed candidate and then wrote a phrase on the write-in line. Can we again consider this to be a pattern of similar marks? It appears it might be the voters name, maybe,
It's the same.
but it's the same on all of the contests.
I would think we would treat this one the same and count the voters, when they bubbled in. I agree.
Gentlemen, the board has determined votes for the United States Senator Mohammed Saqib, United States Representative, Congressional District Number 7, Pramila Jayapal, Secretary of State, Marquez Tiggs, Legislative District Number 32, State Senator Patricia Weber, Legislative District Number 32, Position Number 1, Cindy Rue, Legislative District Number 32, Representative Position Number 2, Lauren Davis,
Thank you. We are on to item B-0008. Got one item on the front. I guess it's two items on the front. So in congressional number 9, voters written first choice with an arrow pointing to one of the bubbled choices in an otherwise overvoted contest. Is that a written instruction to vote for that candidate? There's a note to take a look at how we actually ask people to make a correction, where sometimes people write in choice 1 or choice 2. Not exactly the same situation, but it might be something to take into account. So we would also want that same consideration for senator. Looks like we just didn't hit the arrow on that one. We did. I see it right here now. I see it here as a senator, but here it's not. We just did an arrow in the ballot. Oh yes, put an arrow in the corner. Thank you. Thank you.
I think, looking at the rules, it's pretty clear to me that that's their choice. The first
Yeah.
choice is so it's their written instructions. I would go with who their first choice is.
I agree.
Gentlemen, the board has determined a vote for United States Senator Patty Murray, United States Representative, Congressional District Number 9, Adam Smith.
Okay, now we are on item B-0009. Got 3 items on the front. So for US Senator, the first contest here, they maybe circled Republican Party under Bill here, and maybe underlined the party here for Dave and underline the whole party preference for Leon here, leaving only one vote that didn't have any lines, were any of those supposed to be corrections that missed the mark, maybe due to low fluency? Or is it too faint? That's the first one. For congressional 7, we've got 2 target areas completely filled in, and one of them is partially circled, but it kind of goes through the name of the candidate. Ordinarily, circles aren't adequate for written instructions to resolve an overvote unless there's some sort of attempt to make a correction. But the low fluency might make it so that could be a possibility. And the same situation with the Secretary of State contest here. There's one target area where the bubble's filled in, another one where the bubble is circled. What do we consider the votes?
I think this is a tough one.
Could it be a low fluency voter who's attempting to make a correction? That's what we were unclear of.
It's hard to tell because there's no clear pattern. Some things are underlined, some things are circled.
Yeah, I can't ascertain the intent to be able to say which candidate the voter intended to vote for, even taking into account the possibility that it's a low fluency voter.
And board, is that for all 3 of those races?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gentlemen, the board has determined for United States Senator overvote. United States Representative, Congressional District Number 7, overvote. Secretary of State, overvote.
We're on now item B0010. Got a single item on the front. In the Secretary of State contest, the voter bubbled 2 candidates and put an X next to the target area on one, next to the response actually on one of those candidates. Is that X a written instruction to correct the vote? Or is that X an attempt to make it be the actual vote?
Is there any rule that would help us with that, or is that just going to? Is there an answer?
Well, Rule E, page 44, tells us about written instructions. So you can use arrows or circles to help clearly tell us what your attempt to make a correction was. And you can make a correction by putting an X over a marked target area and then selecting a secondary target area.
So if the X were clearly over the target area and the second target area was filled in, there would be no question that that would be a correction and a vote for.
Yes, if that X was on the actual target area instead of on the other side, we would have counted that a vote for the candidate who did not have the X over their bubble.
Right.
to me, that's the closest rule, which makes me think the voter was determining not to vote for Ms. Pirelli and instead to vote for Mr. Wagner.
I agree.
The board has determined a vote for Secretary of State for Keith Wagner.
Okay, item B-0011. It's one contest on the back. So Ledge 34, representative position number 1. But we'll start with the story of the rest of the ballot. So throughout the ballot, the voter bubbled a candidate and put an arrow in pencil next to the right of the candidate. In this race, the race in question, they only put the arrow, but they didn't fill in the target area. So here you can see target area, arrow, target area, arrow, target area, arrow, target area, arrow. On the contest in question, they put an arrow, but they didn't fill in the target area. Is that a written instruction to add a vote for Joe? Or just a written note as they're sort of going through their pre-voting? Sometimes people do that.
I think it's the latter. I would not count the vote for Joe in that one.
I agree, because they intentionally filled out all of the other circles, so.
Chairman, the canvassing board has determined for legislative district number 34, representative position number 2, undervote.
Item B-0012. We've got one on the back. This is for Ledge 30, representative position number 2. This messy mark would ordinarily be counted for Ashley, since there's nothing written in on the write-in line. But is the line that goes through Ashley meant to be a correction and turned into an undervote? And you can see that the voter has some low fluency elsewhere, but none of these other contests gave us any real pause or question. We could clearly discern which candidate got these votes. But we're not sure if Ashley should get this vote or if this is a correction. You guys wait for a second.
I think that vote should count for a vote for Ashley.
Yeah, I think looking at the rest of the ballot, they just had some messy marks kind of throughout, so I think you're right.
The board has determined for legislative district number 30, representative position number 2, a vote for Ashley. Not sure I took away.
We're now on item B-0013. Got an item on the front. So for US Senator, we have a mark in between 2 candidates. When we're looking at messy marks like this, we're often looking at, does it go more into one or the other? Or does it touch one line or the other? This one appears to be significantly in the middle. So we would like you to be the judge.
Thank you.
This is squarely in the middle between the two. I mean, there's one little line that kind of goes down into the circle for Dan, but it's not clear that that was an intent. I mean, it's just a scribble in between 2. I would have a hard time determining what the voter's intent is on that one.
Or because there's no ink in either oval, how do we feel about an undervote, meaning a vote, no vote? The board has determined for United States Senator, undervote.
Now we're on to item B-0014. We've got one item on the front. For legislative district number 11, representative position number 1, another messy mark that goes into 2 ovals, and it appears pretty equally in both.
I actually thought on that one, it looked like to me it was more in Stephanie's oval.
Yeah. Certainly feels, not like I can tell, but it seems like it started there, right? You know, and like if you look at the pen marks, it sort of looks like it's started there and went up. So I could agree with that.
Chairman, the board has determined for legislative district number 11, representative position number 1, a vote for Stephanie Peters.
Okay, B-0015, we have 3 items on the front. Okay, so for, let's see, Secretary of State, we've got mark that go in, we have a messy mark that goes into 2 candidates. For Congressional 9 and Ledge 47 down here, the messy mark either almost touches a bubble or slightly, barely, almost touches a bubble. And there's one on the back that we're not asking about because it's so far from the bubble. We're not counting that as a vote. I believe that for Kyle, we did count it as a vote because it does go into the bubble. So it's a low fluency voter.
I feel like for the Secretary of State vote for Mark, it's more apparent to me that it's in that bubble, but I mean, I think that's I think the intent is for these, for Mark, Bill, Doug, but I don't know. Sort of in line with the last one that we discussed where.
To me, it feels closer, no pun, to the mark on Mark, that they intended to vote on Mark, but I can't, it's not close enough to me for Bill or Doug. That's the challenge I have.
Well, there are no scribbles inside the target area for Doug or for Bill.
Stephanie, you're thinking because those are the closest ovals there.
And that's their pattern of marking the ballot.
I see
So
what you're saying.
that was sort of,
Like slightly higher.
they're not just scribbles, they're not just doodles, they're just the
And it's
person,
close enough
you know,
to you.
yeah.
Okay, I can go with that one.
But I can see why on the back, you know, it's like not even, it's just a scribble over the text, you know, that says partisan office, vote for, you know, I mean, it's not even close. Whereas I feel like on this front, it's a little close to touching it, you know,
I can go with that.
Chairman, the board has determined to vote for United States Representative Congressional District Number 9, a vote for Doug Bassler.
Mark. Mark.
Secretary of State, Mark Malosha. Legislative District Number 47, State Senator Bill Boyce.
Item B-0016, it's one contest on the front. The Secretary of State contest. Again, we have a messy mark in between two candidates, sort of touching both ovals.
These are tough. This one's tough because there's a slightly messy vote below that kind of goes under the target area. And this also, you could say, well, that's going under the target area. It's also kind of touching both. And
Yeah, I can't tell the difference from the Secretary of State. I can't tell the voter's intent on the Secretary of State's
I
contest.
think it's a tougher call.
The board can't determine if Mark Malosha or Julie Anderson's ovals are filled in. Board, there is, do we want to call this an undervote? Meaning there is no ink, no ink in either one, or an overvote that there's ink in both.
I think, to me, ink in both.
I think so, yeah.
Gentlemen, the board has determined Secretary of State an overvote.
Item B-0017, it's one item on the back. Another messy mark for you. In the legislative district number 11, representative position number 2, there is ink that appears to be somewhat equal into two candidates' ovals.
It's tough. I think it's kind of the same,
I agree.
same situation.
So that we counted as an overvote since it was in each, both candidates, each candidate.
Board has determined legislative district number 11, representative position number 2, an overvote.
Item B-0018, we have a single item on the front. Again, in the Secretary of State contest, it appears that two target areas are filled in and both have some ink in it. We are unclear on what the vote is.
I think the same, I think to be consistent, and it's an overvote.
Board has determined for Secretary of State, overvote.
So on item B-019, we have a single item on the front for congressional district we kind of
So I think that's the same as this
I
one.
agree.
The board believes that this is also an overvote. United States Representative, Congressional District Number 7, inked in both ovals, overvote.
item B-0020. A single item on the front. Again, in the Secretary of State contest, there are 2 target areas where there is ink in both of them.
I think the same situation. So for these others, it looks like they just, a messy voter. But maybe it was a little more clear in some of these other races.
Board has determined for the Secretary of State, overvote.
Now on to item B-0021, single item on the front. And again, it's the Secretary of State contest where there is ink in 2 target areas.
Same situation.
Board has determined for Secretary of State, overvote.
Now we're on to item B-0022. We have a single item on the front. So for Legislative District 47, State Senator, there is a mark below one of the candidates. Note that we would not call it a write-in vote because there's no writing on the line. It comes really close to this candidate's name, but doesn't appear to be touching. So very, very, very close.
I would count that for a vote for Claudia.
I agree.
Board has determined for Legislative District Number 47, State Senator, a vote for Claudia Kaufman.
Item B-0023. We have an item on the front. So for Representative District, Congressional District Number 7, there is a printed candidate for Mila Jayapal, and then there is a write-in on the line, Pamela Jaya PayPal. It's clear who this is referencing. Is this a name variation or is this just a joke write-in?
I think they're making a joke or a statement about the candidate, but it's not clear. I mean, does that,
But would you still count it as a vote for Jayapal?
I mean, I think according to the rules, right, it would be, if they've written someone in and that's the.
For name variation.
Yes.
Yeah,
But what one is that, Carolyn?
Name variation is page 56, rule J.
That's a little different because that's for a declared write-in whose name is not on the ballot. This person's name is on the ballot. It feels to me that the voter is trying to make a variation for Camilla Jive.
We also apply Rule J to candidates who are on that.
Say that again?
We also apply Rule J to candidates who are on that.
Oh, okay. If that's how, then I would count that as a vote for the Camilla Jive.
I think so as well.
The board, Gerald, has determined for United States Representative, Congressional District Number 7, a vote for candidate Pramila Jayapal.
Item B-0024. We have an item on the back. So for legislative district number 12, representative position number 1 and position number 2. This voter believes they got the wrong ballot and should be voting in Ledge 5 on the basis that they put a big X through there and are writing my district is number 5. They are mistaken and should be voting in legislative district number 12. We don't know the individual voter, but we know that the ballot that came down was attached to a voter who was registered in district number 12, legislative district number 12. Given that, should the votes for Keith and Mike stand because they are eligible to vote in district 12, or because they put a big X through the contest, should we now consider those to be undervoted because they X'd out the entire contest?
It's a good question.
They're all good questions.
And we can't make the names that were written in write-ins for the contest there
Right.
because they wrote down a different district.
Right. Well, the voter clearly did not think that these votes were going to count in District 12 because they think they're in a different district. I would tend to maybe not count them because they just clearly, you know, they X'd it out, they filled it out, but then they X'd it out and they just figure it doesn't count.
Because I'm in this district.
Right.
Chairman, the board has determined for legislative district number 12, representative position number 1, undervote. Legislative district number 12, representative position number 2, undervote.
Item B-0025. Legislative District 34, representative number 2. There we go. Is this an oval trace, which would not be considered a vote because there's a clear rule that says an oval trace is not a vote, or because it's not completely oval and it's more of a circle, is that a vote? Rule A, page 2 is where you would find the statement that an oval trace is not a vote.
And it wouldn't be voter fatigue, or would that count as voter fatigue of, you know, just tiring of filling in the circles?
It feels more like that to me than just an oval trace because there's a little more effort.
More to it, you know?
Yeah, so I would go ahead and count that vote in that item.
I agree.
The board has determined for legislative district number 34, representative position number 2, a vote for Joe Fitzgibbon.
So I forgot, we have 27 ballots, not 26. but you're close. We're now on item B-0026. And this one is a whole ballot situation. It'll be hard to see on the screen. Okay. So the voter dotted one candidate for every race, except for in congressional number 7, where they put very faint lines through each response area, including the blank write-in line here. Ordinarily, these slashes, except in the write-in lines, would be considered votes, and the dots could be considered hesitation marks. When we're looking at hesitation marks internally, if there's no other bubble filled in, a mark as a hesitation mark if there's 0 movement and the pen has only incidental movement. But maybe the dots counts as votes per the voter fatigue rule. There's also tiny dots on the 2 contests on the back, but they're very faint.
Right, because the question would be why return a blank ballot?
Correct. And it's easier to consider something a hesitation mark if there's another filled in oval, then a small dot is more obviously a hesitation mark, but when they're by their own, there's more of a question.
You can't apply the pattern rule because the marked out,
The slashes, would-
yeah.
Would negate the pattern, right?
Just checking with our comms team if you can hear us.
And could you take it race by race where in the sections where there's only a dot and that's the only mark in that section, could you treat that differently than this congressional district number 7 where they're all a line for each one of them?
I think we could consider the other contest votes. We could call that rule A, that there's a mark in the target area.
Right,
It's just so faint. We
right.
wanted to get the board to determine if that sounded good.
I think to Stephanie's question, for everything except for congressional district, I think we should count everything but congressional district 7 using the dot for those races where the voter could not count anything in 7.
I agree, because it's too difficult to determine. I mean, 7 sort of negated, it's all crossed out, so. But I think it's clear, it's clearer, not super clear, but there's some intent there.
Geraldine, the board has determined the following votes. United States Senator, a vote for Patty Murray. United States Representative Congressional District number 7. Board, there's a little bit of a line in each oval. Do you want that to be an overvote or an undervote?
To be an overvote.
United States Representative Congressional District number 7 is an overvote. Just gonna have to make sure you're watching me here. Secretary of State is a vote for Julie Anderson. Legislative District number 32, State Senator, a vote for Jesse Solomon. Ledge 32, Rep 1, Cindy Rue. Ledge 32, Position 2, Lauren Davis.
Right now, we're made it to the final ballot, which is B-0027. Got one item on the back in legislative district number 34, representative position number 1 is the unbubbled write-in for Leah, a written instruction to vote for Leah. Or is it an overvote because there's already another target area filled in for another candidate in addition to Leah when you're looking at the printed candidate field, I'm sorry. Leah is filled in, Leah is also written in. If this bubble for Emily wasn't filled in, it would be a vote for Leah. Does this vote for Emily turn this into an overvote?
Emily turns it into a vote.
I agree.
Board has determined for legislative district number 34, position number 1, an overvote.
That is all I have for voter intent review today. You wouldn't mind signing our,
Would you like us to make a motion? You bet.
yes, please.
I make a motion for the King County election staff to count the ballots as marked.
Second.
All in favor?
I,
Any further business, Geraldine or canvassing board members?
There is not today, no.
No further business. The canvassing board meeting for Thursday, August 11th is adjourned at 2:58 p.m. Thank you all.